Advanced human intelligence naturally generates a profound curiosity about the nature of reality. In Vedantic philosophy, this exploring tendency is known as jiññāsa. It produces specific, unavoidable questions. What exactly is this creation? Is there a creator? What is death, and where do we actually go when it happens? The answers to those questions form the core of a foundational text of Advaita Vedanta, known as Tattva Bodha. This text does not ask the reader to accept its conclusions on blind faith. Instead, it operates as a rigorous architectural epistemology. It uses a strict 5-stage process to systematically deconstruct how we perceive reality. The core thesis is straightforward. By independently analyzing the individual human microcosm and the cosmic macrocosm, one can logically prove they share an essential, identical unity. Completing this intellectual derivation serves as the direct catalyst for a permanent psychological liberation, a baseline state of fulfillment known as Vidyananda. The first step in this blueprint assesses the student's psychological starting point, a stage called sadhana chatushtayam. A practitioner must possess 4 specific psychological qualifications. Without these prerequisites, the text argues, the student cannot derive any lasting benefit from the subsequent analysis. The most critical of these starting conditions is viveka, or discrimination. Viveka is defined precisely as the intellectual capacity to distinguish between sources of fake, ephemeral security and those that offer permanent, real security. Only when this lens of strict discrimination is firmly in place can the practitioner safely proceed to dissect their own existence. That dissection happens in the second stage, vyashti vichara, the rigorous analysis of the individual microcosm. The bedrock axiom here is that every individual is a composite of exactly 2 distinct units. The first unit is anatma. This is the material, constantly changing aspect of the self, which the text analyzes from 2 different angles. The first angle is textural, categorizing the physical body as gross matter and the mind and intellect as subtle and causal matter. The second angle analyzes functional divisions, mapping the individual across a 5-fold model called the Koshas. This model descends inward, starting from the visible anatomical structure of the body down into invisible physiological functions like respiration and digestion. It penetrates deeper into the emotional personality, then the rational intellect, and finally bottoms out at a hidden subconscious layer of pure latency. All 5 of those layers are material and subject to change. They stand in direct contrast to the second unit, the Ātma, defined as non-material, spiritual consciousness. Ātma pervades the body to make it alive, much like electricity powering a fan, but it's not a byproduct of the body itself. Consciousness needs a physical medium to express itself, but when that medium breaks down, the underlying consciousness remains fully intact. And despite the infinite variety of human bodies, minds, and intellects, the enlivening principle of Ātma running through them is entirely singular and identical. The ultimate goal of dissecting the microcosm is to force a psychological shift. The practitioner stops identifying as decaying matter and anchors their identity in eternal consciousness. We then scale this logic up to the third stage of the blueprint, samashti vichara, the analysis of the total cosmos. This framework adheres strictly to a foundational scientific law. Matter cannot be created from nothing, nor can it be destroyed. Because of this, the Vedantin views the word creation as inaccurate. The universe was never created. It has simply always existed in a potential state. This seed form of the universe is called Maya. It functions exactly like butter existing latently within milk. Universal creation, therefore, is simply the mechanical process of extracting the unmanifest into tangible manifestation. This manifestation unfolds in structured stages, evolving from subtle baseline elements, combining into subtle bodies, and finally condensing into gross physical elements like water and air. The conclusion here is that the universal macrocosm is constructed of the exact same 3-level material structure, gross, subtle, and causal, as the human microcosm. This brings us to the philosophical climax of the framework, Aikyam Vichara, the investigation of oneness. This stage addresses an obvious contradiction. How can a physically limited human individual possibly be essentially identical to the vast governing cosmos? To answer this, we have to return to the definition of Ātma. Consciousness is non-material and completely devoid of any attributes, properties, or limitations of its own. Consciousness gains attributes only when expressing through a material medium, like light through a lens. Expressing through the tiny human body creates a distorted, limited individual self, Jivatma. Expressing through the massive universe generates superior attributes, creating Paramatma, the cosmic intelligence. This leads to the great equation of the text, Aham Brahma Asmi. If you intellectually remove the distorting material mediums, the tiny prism and the massive lens, the original underlying consciousness is revealed to be perfectly identical. All human limitations, flaws, and problems belong exclusively to the temporary material medium. The true self remains eternally problem-free. The fifth and final stage of the framework is Aikyana Jana Phalam, which outlines the definitive, practical benefit of gaining this self-knowledge. By truly claiming the eternal Ātma as one's primary identity, the deep-seated biological fears of aging, illness, and death are neutralized at their root. Standard worldly pleasures are finite, highly unpredictable, and conditional. Because we rely on them while knowing they can vanish at any moment, they inherently generate chronic stress. The alternative is Vidyananda. This is a baseline, unconditional cognitive joy that stands entirely independent of all time-bound worldly outcomes. Possessing this stable internal fallback point creates Karpanya Nivritihi, which is a state of complete psychological freedom from desperation and helplessness. Achieving this state does not mean retreating from society. It means engaging fully with the world, but using the physical body as an instrument rather than mistaking it for your core identity. Even when the physical body's ability to transact finally ends, the practitioner knows their true existence continues undisturbed as the cosmic consciousness itself. Tattva Bodha ultimately serves as a map. It systematically strips away the false, stress-inducing layers of the material self, leaving only the tranquil, indestructible architecture of pure consciousness.